There are approximately 87 podcasts available today. How do you make sure your podcast stands out from the crowd? The following tips are sure to hurl your podcast onto the internet and secure your legacy as a pro-pod producer. It may even make you rich, but mostly you will become a pro-pod producer. First, get an idea for a podcast.
Sandwiches.
Sandwiches is no good.
True crime health tips for entrepreneurs.
That's been done.
Friends with deficits?
Eventually, you'll find an idea. Next, come up with a catchy title.
Sandwiches. True crime health tips for entrepreneurs. Friends with deficits. Yes!
Part 2. Designing your podcast.
To stand out in a crowd of noisy, self-righteous, blabbering drivel, you'll need a show that really pops. Try bright colors or this eye-catching font. Wow, I'm listening already. How many times has your grandmother or person who never listens to podcasts told you these gems?
You have a podcast? My 6-year-old nephew has a podcast.
I think I saw your podcast. Was that the one at the beach? Or were you were holding the baby?
Sorry, I only watch news, or radio, or books on tape.
These strange comments can be eradicated with a simple fix. Visually pleasing content. And, occasionally, a long explanation of what a podcast actually is.
Part 6. What is a podcast?
That's a good question. Why, if you weren't certain what a podcast was, you might not even be aware that you're listening to one right now. And that would be incredibly unfortunate. This is a podcast. To put it simply, it's a digital audio file of interminable blathering compressed at 128 kilohertz and downloaded through an RSS feed directly to your streaming device. Why else would they call it a podcast? In fact, the term podcast is a combination of two words. Podka, which is itself a combination of two words, potato and vodka, and ast, as in, you just asked me what a podcast is. So together we have a question asked of potato vodka. Is it better than grain vodka? Potato vodka? Really? And hence, the world's first podcast, Vodka Talk, was released to the public in 1927. By 2018, tequila had outranked vodka as the trendy, overpriced liquor of choice in every hip LA bar, yet the name podcast remains. Today's podcasts cover a wide range of subjects and come in 4 delicious flavors: cherry, Cool Ranch, cynical, and root beer. Get yours today! Hey, that kind of sounds like a commercial, Adam.
I know. Well, actually, we should have a commercial.
All right, go ahead.
You want to do the Patreon one?
I guess go ahead and hit the Patreon one, yeah.
Oh, Patreon. Oh, Patreon. How the hell do I support this show? This shit is the best, let all the people know. Oh, Patreon. You want the hookup? Go on and look up patreon.com/friendswithdeficits. Oh, Patreon. Become a supporter for just a few quarters. patreon.com/friendswithdeficits. Yeah.
Part 3C. Recording your podcast.
To record your podcast, you'll first need a microphone. Microphones may seem complicated, but you can build your own with a few household items. Beginning with a cardboard toilet paper tube, stretch a piece of wax paper across one end and secure it with a rubber band. Then, glue a piece of string hanging from the other end. Next, stuff the inside of the tube with parts from the inside of an old radio to add heft and technology. Lastly, put down this little craft project and record your podcast by talking directly into your phone.
Hello and welcome to Vodka Talk.
See, I told you my nephew had a podcast.
I'm your niece.
They can't see you, honey.
Chapter 3. Research.
Research for your podcast is essential to understand the topic of discussion and not come off sounding like a fool. It is highly recommended to hold at least one master's degree in whatever topic you are discussing, or have shared an intimate evening with your guest. If neither of these are possible to achieve before you launch your episode, have a dictionary and a bottle of Chablis on hand. This will lighten the mood, and the Chablis will help you understand the meaning of the words.
Did you know that Chablis is spelled with an S at the end? That's because it's plural for Chablis, and there's more than one Chablis in a bottle. A Chablis is just a fancy European word for bubble, and Chablis is a bubbly drink made from crushed grappes. However, long before the beverage enters your mouth, the bubbles, or Chablis, are popped by means of a small, thin bamboo stick, known as, you guessed it, a podcast. Now back to our lesson.
That's some research for you.
Part 8. Interviewing guests.
To ensure a successful interview, it's imperative that you make your guest feel comfortable. Make sure you are clear and articulate.
Thanks for being on the show. So why don't you tell me a little about yourself?
Sorry, I couldn't find anything about yogurt shelves.
Keep in mind that humans usually make better guests.
Okie dokie.
Part 8. The Art of Editing.
Editing is at the heart of any successful podcast under 4.5 hours. It ensures a smooth flow of dialogue, helps deliver concise, useful information to the listener before they have to park, and provides more clarity and less bullshit. Listen to this interview before and after the miracle of editing. Before.
How did you, are you somehow with what you're dealing with, your thing that...
Cancer?
Yeah, the cancer. Is it difficult for you to deal with, to live with?
Sure, I guess.
And after editing.
How are you dealing with your cancer?
Sure.
In the next example, editing down the length of a longer conversation and adding music creates an exciting change in narrative. Here's the original.
So you would think a third arm is a deficit or at least an obstacle, but once you learn to adapt, you're able to juggle all sorts of things in your life.
That's cool. That's great. So what do you normally do? What's your job?
I'm a juggler.
Ah.
And now the edited version.
So, you'd think a third partner would be fun, but I can't do this.
Hey man, it's all right. Let me get you another drink.
No, you're poisoning me. You're poisoning me.
Part 8. Sound mixing.
There are countless options available when mixing your podcast that can set your show apart from the crowd. But first, let's start with the basics. EQ. EQ stands for equalization of audio frequencies. Audio frequencies are microscopic organisms that float happily along sound waves towards your ear. Once inside, they're tasked with recreating the sound you're supposed to hear, after which they immediately succumb to death. Millions of these corpses eventually pile up, creating a wax-like glob of carcasses in the ear canal. Anyhow, removing the low frequencies, or bass, of a recording can make it sound tinny and thin, like my voice sounds right now. Removing the high frequencies, or treble, will make the recording sound muffled and dull, like my voice sounds at this time. If you remove both the bass and treble, you get something
completely different. So try to keep it equal with
equalization.
Part 8. Audio effects.
Effects. Audio processing effects can be used to completely change the sound of your recording. Perhaps you recorded in a closet, but you want people to think you were in the Taj Mahal? A little reverb can put your listeners right there with you. We recorded this at the Taj Mahal, but there are plenty of other, even cheaper options available. Sometimes a room has natural reverb. You may do your best work locked in the bathroom. But when you're through, you really should get around to recording your podcast. Finally, the last effect is depression. Depression is what evens out all the screams and lonely silence around you. Depression is the way that we see...
Buzz, sorry, that's actually compression.
Compression?
Right. Compression.
Oh. Well, I feel much happier now.
Great. All right, let's try it again. Take 2.
No. So just remember when mixing your podcast to always try to make it sound better, not worse.
Chapter 2. Fiction.
A note on creating fiction podcasts. As we know, the world is currently experiencing a crisis of lack of information, with no means to acquire both necessary and trivial knowledge anywhere. Yet, despite this, some people would still rather make up a cute story or lie to their audience for the sake of entertainment. While this is illegal in most states, it's worth mentioning that there are some reliable best practices for creating a fictional podcast, should you choose to do so. For instance, every story has a theme, a hungover bride, and a story. To create a good story, one must create compelling characters. What about Old Man Floyd? Man, what a character that guy is. I'll put him in your podcast fairy tale. Floyd. If the show is about a modern dysfunctional family with some crazy neighbors from across the street, why aren't you pitching this to NBC right now? Finally, a podcast with a fictional narrative is a lot like reading a book, or having a book read to you, or being read to sleep. Or falling asleep while being read to sleep from a story in a book being read by someone who's also asleep but reading the story to you while you're dreaming that you're reading the story that the person was reading to you while they were asleep.
Adam.
What? Oh.
What happened? You okay?
Yeah, I think I just fell asleep when you were talking about your thing.
Cancer.
Yeah, and I had this weird ass dream.
Just now?
Yeah, I was making a podcast.
You are making a podcast.
Yeah, but it was a podcast about making a podcast. And Buzz was the announcer.
I know that guy.
Yeah, Buzz. And I think we were at the Taj Mahal, and there was Chablis, and my crazy neighbor from across the street came over.
Hey, I have to go soon. Do you want to finish this interview?
Yeah, sorry. Do you want one more drink?
Sure, I guess.
Wait, what?
Sure.
Wait, why did you just say it like that?
I mean, You're poisoning me.
Wait, this is all like stuff that was in the dream, I swear to God.
You really should get around to recording your podcast.
Oh, right.
And can you change this music? It's giving me a headache.
Sorry, I was trying to make you comfortable. All right, let me finish this drink, and then I want to hear about how you got rid of that cancer thing.
I didn't get rid of it.
What?
Never mind. You know what you could fix me?
Yeah?
Something to eat.
All right, let me see what I got.
Sandwiches?
Appendix 12. Marketing your podcast.
So now you have a podcast and you'd like to market it to a wide audience. Or perhaps you just listen to podcasts when you're at the market. In either case, marketing es muy bueno. So how does one market a podcast? Well, that certainly is a good question. Hold on a moment while we look into that.
Your listenership is important to us. Please remain online.
Well, there seems to be no way to market a podcast. Of course, if there was, it wouldn't be a secret, would it? Our little secret. And you're not going to tell anyone, are you? We hope you've enjoyed our edifying little journey down the filthy alleyways of podcast creation. You now have all the information you need to join the ranks of the elite few who create podcasts. The Podcasters. We look forward to somehow seeing your computerized audio on the internet. Good luck, and thanks for listening.
Friends with Deficits bears no responsibility for the loss of friendship, employment, or the inability to groom oneself directly related to starting a podcast. Encouragement to start one's own podcast is neither implied nor intended by Friends with Deficits or its advertising partners.
Be sure to tune in for our next Friends with Deficits modern media instructional podcast entitled Music Videos. Check out the ass on that song.
All right, well, that was informative. I'd like to thank my guest, who was my host and also my friend, co-producer and co-writer, Buzz Moran. I'd also like to thank my incredible cast, Leela Henley, Jeff Mills, Tashi Logan, Kim Turner, Ann Guidry, Zoe Plum, and of course, Siri.
Wow, thanks.
We also had additional music by Andy Nolte. So this is the season finale of Season 2 of Friends with Deficits. We're going to take a little break and then figure out what's next. I got all sorts of strange ideas now. So please listen to the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Tell your smartass speaker to play Friends with Deficits. Sign up for our newsletter at friendswithdeficitspodcast.com. Tell your friends about us. And if you'd like to support the show, you can visit patreon.com/friendswithdeficits. Thanks again for listening. I'm Adam Sultan. You really should get around to recording your podcast.